first start off by doing a little bit of screen sharing here. So if you can all just stay with me here. So I do want to just kind of go over a few of the reminders for the session, some of the norms that we're going to have. And first off, I want to point out that this is going to be a real-time discussion for all of us. We're just kind of going to kind of explore this together. So I really want to encourage everyone, if you have a question in process, so, at any time, feel free to break in, use the hand raising function. So if you go to participants, there's a little bar there to raise your hand and I'll recognize you and call upon you. Or if I'm not catching it, feel free to jump in and just say, excuse me, Daniel, question, and we'll make it happen. I think it'll be a much better use of our time if we can, as we're going through, not wait and lose those questions to the end, but actually get them real time. This particular Zoom session will be recorded because we want to get it onto the Google Sites page for everyone to view later. So I just want to put that out there. And if anyone is feeling, like I don't want to be videoed, or today's not the day, feel free to shut down your video at any time. I won't take any offense to that. And when we get to the point, I am going to point out that we are going to be using topics pages that I've used this year as kind of examples of work. And all the topics pages I'm going to show you today are going to be available, or already are available, in the topics bank. And I'll show you how to access those so you can actually migrate those topic pages over into your classroom, so you can have them there and you can look through them and kind of go through all of that stuff. All right. And so again, I'll give you the step-by-step on how that's going to happen when we get there. I just want to make sure that there is no one in the waiting room. Oh, here's our last two. Give me a second, everyone. I'm going to stop screening for a sec. You can stop sharing, excuse me. Let's see. I lost my mouse, which is fantastic. Okay, here we go. Found it. All right. So as I get these last couple of participants in, again, remember, we're just kind of doing this together. And I think now we are complete. So welcome to everyone. Let's get back to sharing. So let's talk about this. And this is the meta stuff I was talking about to begin with. And when we think about creating effective and intuitive topics pages, the things we want to focus on is the big question of why the topics page. And I want to point out that the use of the topics page in general isn't an issue of whether or not we're online. It's not an issue of I'm this type of teacher or that type of teacher. I want to frame it as the use of topics pages is actually an issue of equity. I want you to think about your classes this year, and I want you to think about your different students, how some of them would come into class and they really weren't paying attention, or they're having a bad day, or they were on, maybe you were missing a student because they had a medical issue, or you have students who had learning differences that really needed some extra support. The topics page is a place to try and bridge that gap, to try and address those issues of equity for all students. Of course, we'd love to have a class where everyone is hanging on our every word or every activity that we put in, but that's just not the case. And so I want to point out that even when we were in person this year, I made it a point to utilize the topics page in the same manner that I kept using it once we moved online. So I want you to consider that it's bigger than just an online or in-person discussion, but it's really kind of a supplementing of the great teaching you're doing. So, and I want to point out that I know this is counterintuitive to the argument. When we think about this idea that we are teachers, educators who are employed to get in there and impart our skills and our knowledge and our abilities onto students through activity and scaffolding and lecture, but really the topics page gives you the opportunity to create a space where the students can do that without your physical presence. And while I don't want anyone to be scared by that idea. If anything, it's just this great opportunity of, well, how can I support kids that didn't engage with me one-on-one when they had the opportunity? And what about the moment when I can't be there, especially in this virtual space, when we think about, well, what if I'm sick one day? What if I have a family emergency? Can I create a system that manages the students' learnings and my expectations, even when I'm not physically present? And again, I know that's a scary proposition to say, well, what happens when teaching can exist without the teacher? But you are doing the work. I want to ensure you, you are doing the work in a substantial way, which allows for this system to exist. Now, there's a lot of discussion out there that's going on about, oh, well, Google Classroom or Google Sites and all this stuff. I just want to put my pitch out there. And a lot of this is going to be, and it's going to sound like me selling something to you, but I promise you it comes from a place of genuine interest. When we think about the online space, there's so much work that goes into it. And I think everyone in this room can attest to the fact that you all have put a substantial amount of work into surviving these last couple of months. What I'm proposing to you is that when you look at the idea of the topics page, that we're looking at it as a way of working smarter, not harder, a way that we can consolidate our abilities and cut down on the amount of kind of redundancies that we have. So that's my push for our topics pages as they stand, because many people talk about, Google Classroom or Google Sites. And the problem with that is all of those things, including our topics pages, are what we call learning management systems, LMSs. And the problem is that only one of those learning management systems works with our student information system. Our student information system is the place we communicate. It's the place where we grade and record grades, where we set all that stuff up. It's the thing that David Olds knows better than probably, any other piece of knowledge he has for all the amount of work he does on it. But I'm gonna say there is value, intense value, with the idea of using a learning management system that is integrated with your student information system. And that's what the topics page is. And I promise you by the end of this session, you will understand that anything you can do on Google Classroom, anything that you can create on a Wix page or a Google site, you can actually do on the topics page. All right, so I just want to put that out there as kind of, here's the reason to kind of hold tight to the topics page as it stands. So in order to be able to do that, in order to be able to have a system in which, sorry, I'm going to get out of here just because I think we have a chat. My apologies. It looks like we have a comment. My students said exactly that. They said having it all on Whipple Hill made their lives so easy and our transition seamless. So yeah, that's a little bit of echo. Thank you for that. I believe that was Delphine that put that out there. So first off, before we get into the nuts and bolts of it, again, I want to point out this, that if you're going to have a topics page, how can I maximize that space? How can I make it so that I don't have to be there in order for it to execute and happen? Well, two things really need to exist. The first is that the system needs to be built intuitively, meaning it has to be user-friendly. So it really requires us to shift the paradigm of our thinking and say, if I'm a user of this, if I'm going to log in and see something, what would I want to see in order to help me follow it? And that may ask you to articulate instructions a little more in detail. It may ask you to put 1, 2, 3 as far as steps go. It may ask you to envision what your classroom looked like when you were in person and translate that, as if you were a narrator of a story onto a piece of paper. So if you were going to think about your classroom and say, well, I did this first, I did this second, and then we would talk about this and we would transition this way. These are things you would want to intuitively articulate into writing to have this place where students can follow. The user can see it as a friendly place. So for that, you want to create practices that are consistent and recursive. My topics pages, when we get to it, you'll see that every single day where I gave instructions, they were actually formatted the exact same way. So kids knew exactly what they were going to see when they went in. This is first, this is second, this is third, and it always had the same feel. And while for intuitively we might think, well, that's kind of monotonous, it might be boring, it actually is a definitive way to create good habits in your students. They know what to expect. They're not taken off guard. They don't step into your classroom thinking, what am I going to have to do today? What's it going to look like? The fear of the unknown. When we're trying to assuage the fears of our students that are already dealing with a lot, the idea of creating sound practices that they're going to be able to recognize is going to be important. So I want us to consider that. So when we think about those topics pages, before we get into the sharing of it, what are some of your initial thoughts or reactions to the topics page? Who'd like to share what's been your experience with the topics page? What do you think are the limitations of it? What don't you like about it? Anyone want to jump in?
I can.
I personally, I found them to not be super intuitive in terms of creating them. And luckily, I had one or two faculty members who just kind of pulled me aside and showed me how to do certain things. And I consider myself generally a pretty savvy technical person. And you know, I think without a little bit of handholding, I would have had a much more difficult time knowing how to organize it and present it the way I wanted. But once
Absolutely.
everything's set up, I think it's great. I just was a little puzzled why there wasn't more specific PD for this for new employees.
Right. And I think it's an effect that maybe it's something that wasn't utilized before. Again, we and this is what I'm trying to point out, is that I think we do sometimes, with the technology we have available for us, take for granted the fact that we do see students face to face most of the time. And this has now kind of forced us to reevaluate our place with that. But I agree, it's a system that we have to learn, and that takes time, and it takes a little bit of, like you said, hand holding with that. Any other thoughts on the limitations or whatnot? Anna, you have something?
Uh, I used them before and I use them much more now during this transition. And I started using them in a more detailed way, like what we were going to do every day in the class when we met, and very specific. And then I realized that that was multiplying my effort in work. And I realized that for me in particular, I shifted and I started creating just for unit, the entire where the students had organized the learning objectives and all the activities we were going to do from day one to the last day, and all the materials organized there. But then I had another document where I copy and pasted and I used the assignment page for what we were going to be doing each day in class. That for me was much easier, because also if I have multiple sections of a course, I had to create different topics for each class to make it match the day I met them. By keeping it like by unit, by material, the assignment page was easier in the calendar to tell
Got
them
it.
what to do, and I just copy and paste it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of those workarounds that you were struggling with, and they're really small, simple, like paradigm shifts on how we look at how we create the topics page. Any other thoughts or feedbacks on the topics page? Things that you struggle with? Yeah, Midori.
Okay, is this been always my problem, because our school website, they don't recognize these Chinese characters when the front page. When you want to write something, they give you scroll like a question mark. So I'm wondering, is there any way you can fix it?
That would probably be a Paul Way question. I'm actually note that, and I'll send him an email and send you a response to that, because I think those are language settings on a global scale. So that might be something that can be addressed. I don't know if you've talked to him yet.
I talked to him for years.
Okay. Well, why don't I throw out another email to him? Maybe
Maybe in this new one, I don't know.
Yeah, hit him with the new voice. But I understand, yeah, and that's kind of beyond what we're doing here today when it comes to language settings and things like that. But I appreciate you bringing that up, and that being a limitation of the topics page. Any other thoughts before we start looking at examples? All right, let's get into it. So I'm going to start screen sharing here. Let's see here. Forgive me, it's not necessarily. Okay. So I'm going to get into just what we would normally see where we log in, right? And here we are, and if you notice, you usually land on either your bulletin board or your topics page. Now, my bulletin board is the place that I went ahead and put my course syllabus and feedback processes and things like that, a little welcome. But what we're talking about here is the real active topics page. And this is where you get the most flexibility. This is where you have the most opportunity to recreate digitally or through text what happens in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. If you notice that what I've done is I've intuitively thought to myself, okay, how do I make sure that it's not just this one place where everything gets thrown into? How do I organize it in a way? And the first thing I thought, as most of you do, even when we're in the classroom, is I'm going to break it up into my units. When I'm talking about one topic, I'm going to make that its own distinct topics page. When I move on to something else, I'll switch that up. And what I have here are unit topics pages for each of the topics we had this year. Additionally, what I've done is if we've had capstone projects or major projects, I've actually created individual topics pages to showcase that work, to allow students to take a look at each other's work. So for instance, and this might be of use for some of our performing arts or art classes, say for instance, for our honors students, I actually, when we moved to online, I had them create video lectures, mini video lectures, and I was able to compile those into a topics page. And so the students could go in and explore and watch these. And I made this just a place, almost like a gallery of that work. On a more practical level, we had as a final project, an art project for our final text. And what we did there is I created a slideshow in which I posted everyone's work. And if you notice, the photo is accompanied by the student's name as well as an alphanumeric designation, A1, A2, A3, so on and so forth. And what I did is when we got out of that, I additionally put the artist statements, the corresponding alphanumeric with the student's artist statement. So it became kind of this art gallery that they could go through and view. Again, if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to jump in. Go ahead, Virginia.
One question about the step in collecting and uploading here for student work, because if it's in Google Classroom, they just upload, you just put the assignment up there and they upload on their own, so there's no additional work. Here, are you collecting these through email or online and then having to upload them all yourself?
Yeah, so the beauty of this though is that you can do it in mass. So you can, if you have a folder or whatnot where they're dumping all of this work into, you can then all at once, select all and put them into the topics page. I get that it's an extra step, but again, sometimes I personally think that anything we can do with Google is then taking them to a separate site. We have to think about what's their experience, right? It's easier for us to say, here's this Google site, or here's this Google Classroom page. I need you to go there. Whereas here is something where they engage with this every day, and it's here and it's ready. So for me, let me show you exactly what steps this requires. So if I go into the edit button here, you'll notice that I created this, and really all it is one kind of photo gallery where I just put their photos in. It's just a quick drag and drop. and they just populate, and I give their alphanumeric and their name, and I just save that, and then that becomes the slideshow. So it's pretty easy. It's not like you're painstakingly having to upload everyone individually or change the format of the document. And then this just became a big long text box where I just posted, copied and pasted wherever they put their stuff. I get that it's an extra step, but again, we're talking about trying to use one platform, trying to keep their jumping from place to place and getting lost, especially when we're face to face. This is something that can cut down on that. This is probably the most labor intensive topics page I made, but the students really appreciated it. Hallie, you had a question? I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, actually it was what Virginia asked, but I'm also wondering, when I've created the topics pages, I've kind of like, I see all these images that you've added, and I have been having trouble just finding, where do you pull your images from?
Yeah, so what I did is I actually, and this is going to take us to the assignments page. So if I go to my previous, I actually created an assignment where they submitted the work. And so each student was able to submit their text of their artist statement, as well as the image that I could quickly download. And when it went into my downloads, I just dragged it and dropped it from the downloads file into that art gallery. So it was pretty much all collected in one space, but it was a matter of me then taking that information and moving it into that topics page.
Right, which is super cool. I'm wondering about the not in this topics page with their artwork, but your other pages that have a cover photo, like an image. That.
Oh, I
where do
see.
you?
So you're talking about the landing page itself.
Yeah.
The topics page. Okay. So yeah. So let's talk about that. So if I say, for instance, go here, because each one of these topics is actually what I felt was the most aesthetically pleasing piece of art of all my students. So what I was able to do is, if you go into the edit function of the topics page and you go to setup and you edit settings, this is actually what pops up when you create the page in the first place. This cover photo is just a drag and drop as well. You could easily just drag it from a folder, plop it in there, and it becomes the cover for that topics page.
Right. Yeah. And so, sorry, if
no, it's okay.
Let's say you wanted to grab an image that was totally different, like from the internet or something. Is it a similar process to just
actually
drag
so
it? Okay.
Let me show you. If I just create another tab and I just go and I want to search images of classrooms, right? And it'll take me to some Google site here. Any of these I can literally just click and drag. If I put it in my desktop, it just becomes there, and then I just click and drag it onto that same page. So I've actually, and to show you, if I get back out to my topics page, every single one of these other images is from the internet.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Cool.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize for not.
No, it's okay.
Understanding in the first place. Any other questions about this? Where I'm actually going to show you a little bit of the detail in creating these topics pages in a sec. But does anyone have any questions? And I'm sorry, while I'm screen sharing right now, I don't see everyone's hands. So if you just want to go ahead and jump in, I think I'm okay with that. Okay. So what I showed you with those art projects and the honors teaching are just showcase topics. It's not the day-to-day stuff. Let's look at some of the day-to-day kind of ways in which you can structure this stuff. And to do that, I'll go into my first topic unit. And if you notice here, what I've done is I've made discrete text boxes. And to go back to Anna's point, she says, I really didn't like the fact that some classes I met on Monday, some classes I met on Wednesday, and so I can't put the date of the class. And so so then I have to do it doubly, right? Anna, my workaround for that was to mark the classes, not by date, but by meeting. So meeting one was meeting one for all of my sections. So I had 3 sections of English 3. And so instead of putting the date, because they all met on different dates, I just put meeting one. And so everyone kept track of where they needed to be on this page based on what meeting it was. Oh yeah, we did meeting 1, we're on meeting 2, so on and so forth, regardless of the date that it fell on. And so again, that's part of the creating of habits of the students. What can they expect to see when they step into the topics page? What does it look like? And again, you want it to be intuitive and recursive. So if you notice, between meeting 1 and meeting 2 here, we're pretty much looking at the same thing as far as structurally. What I would do is I would start my day with the objective. I would say, even when we were face-to-face, let's talk about what our goal for the day is. And you want to make that student-centered language. You want to break it down for them into what is our actionable, reachable goal. By the end of class, you're going to be able to do this. And so that's where we always started. And I would actually get a volunteer to read this out loud for the class. Next is the rationale, because as an educator, the one thing we always hear is, well, why are we doing this? Or, you know, where does this fit in? So the rationale was always the why. Why is this our objective? Why do we need to get this done? Why is this the work for today? And it was very simple. Here's why we're doing this. This is why we need to do that. And I would have someone read that as well. Next, what I would do is I would create a thought question, a do now, which is, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about today. Let me ask a kind of adjacent or parallel question to our theme. And let me get you thinking about that. In math, this could be a warm-up question. And if we think about our day when we would step into the classroom, we would be responsible for taking attendance. And it's sometimes in those moments of, hey, let me do the actual crossing of the T's and dotting of the I's, where we kind of lose sight of what everyone's doing, and we might have side conversations. Giving them an activity gives us time to get that done. So for me, the do now was a way of saying, hey, I have this administrative stuff to attend to. Here's an activity to keep you busy, to give me a few minutes to let that happen. And you can do this digitally as well. And so what these kids saw in the digital space was what was mirrored in what we did on a day-to-day basis. Then I would give them the agenda for the day, our class activities, and then our homework. So this is what they saw every day, no matter what day, all the way through 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. This is just structurally. I'll get into what I added to that as well. Any questions on this? Again, I really can't see everyone, so just go ahead.
Sorry. So did you use this instead of like the assignments page, like on the class page?
So no, because the students are always saying, if it's not on the assignments page, I don't have to do it, right?
Yeah.
No, what it was is it became habitually the place where you would go first.
Okay.
So everything you do in the day is here. And if you notice, I always finish with the homework. And the homework is just, hey, reminder, go look at the topics page, because the information is there. And then the assignments page. So on the assignments page, I would have the instructions for the assignment, when it was due. Here's the rubric. Here's the supplemental media you're going to need for that. So if anything, I encourage everyone not to do double work, where you explain the assignment here and then do it again in the assignments page, but merely as a placeholder to say, hey, students, there's something there waiting for you. Don't forget to go check it. But if you habitually say everything you're going to need on any given day is here in this box, under this meeting time, in this order, eventually, whether it takes a week or 2, every student, it's just habit. They know. And they never skip a beat. Think about how many times in a year a student comes to you because they forgot what the homework was, or they missed a day. And what's the question? Hey, what did I miss? Or hey, where can I find this? I can guarantee you, under this practice, all those questions either disappear, or the answer to those questions are as simple, I need you to go check the topics page. and it just streamlines. Remember, think about it. We want to try and mitigate the amount of extra work we're putting on ourselves because we are dealing with so much in this online space. This is just a method to help mitigate all that extra stuff, right? And this now it becomes kind of the repository of all your information as well. Your notes, your day-to-day lesson planning, all of that stuff, right? So now at the end of the year, I have this bank that has everything I've done. And so it benefits the student, it benefits yourself in a multitude of ways. Any other questions about this? Go ahead.
Daniel?
Yeah.
So I see this is actually, because I know when we're doing, like, I do stuff on Google, the stream, and I kind of make an announcement, all right, go to assignments. And I also, of course, do a copy and paste of the doc page. So like everything's kind of repeated in a couple places. And I see here, if I was to get into start doing the topics page, that you kind of started off by doing, this is literally the order of today, our meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And then in here in class, you say activities / assignments. So that tells them that they're also to go to assignments as opposed to everything. So this is all inclusive as well, to inform them on a daily first meetup. This is what you do when you first meet up.
Exactly.
You
Exactly.
don't
This
have
is
to-
your,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry. I said this is their landing page. And
Okay.
this was even when we were meeting face to face. So face to face, I was like, okay, let's open up our topics page, everyone. Let's get there.
Okay.
Let's see what we have.
What do you do when you go to Google Classroom? Do you do this something similar to on the stream, the share stream that everyone, like, what was your process with Google Classroom and the share stream?
At my old school, I pretty much exclusively used Google Classroom. And when I came to this, to Crossroads, it's interesting because Rika reminded me of it today. She's like, it's funny how your first couple of days here, when you were starting to look at the topics pages, you would just sit there for hours and think in silence. And she's like, and here you are, now all this time you figured out what you wanted to do. And what I had to learn really quickly is I didn't want to do double work. I didn't want to have redundancy. And I had to figure out how can I make the things that were working for me in Google Classroom available to me in this space. And so to answer your question, Vernon, I don't actually use Google Classroom at all. Everything that I could do in Google Classroom, I can do here. I want to point out that as I go down this topics page, if I look at class meeting 3, I actually gave them the story that we read for that day in text form. I actually gave them embedded the video that I wanted them to watch to help them with the activity for the day. And so these are very similar to the things we would do in Google Classroom. And even if I had, say, a Google form or a Google Doc that I wanted to engage them with, I could actually attach that here in the topics page, the link to it.
So you're having them also, like, for example, I have images that they have to take pictures of and then download, and then they share it with me in Google Classworks in the folders, which is why I would maybe drag stuff to, whatever. So you don't have them do that at all. You just have them load it up here.
Yeah. So if we go to
This
the
is where they put
assignments
their
page,
homework.
yeah. So if we go to the assignments page, the major assignments here, I always have online submission. And the great thing about online submission for this is if you're having them do a 3-part project, you can actually set it up where they can submit 3 different documents or 4 different documents. So it's not just, here's the one assignment with the one piece of information. Sorry, I'm barely getting into the chat here. I apologize for the lag. Looks like Natalie, you had a question about website and online submission, the upload of all files at once. Yeah, so let's look at that real quick. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make an assignment, but what I can do is I can look at one of the edited assignments here. So here I have this is what it would look like when you create an assignment in the assignments page. I can title it, I can give the instructions, detailed instructions, step by step. If I wanted to add the sheet that gives me, you know, the rubric, or if there's a video they have to watch, it could either be a document or it can be a link that sends them somewhere. And then when we get to this file submission, it's always by default, click to no file submission allowed. You would click that to on campus, and if you look here, number of files per student, you can go all the way up to 10. I wouldn't suggest it, obviously, because you don't want students submitting 10 different documents, but think about, maybe it's a process paper, or maybe it's a process project where you have step-by-steps. You can absolutely do that in there. Let's see here. And then let's see, we have, Chippy asks, is there a way to do what Google Classroom does where you upload a document from the Google Drive and each student receives their own copy to type direct on it? What I found, Chippy, is the best way to do that is when you create this assignment, everyone submits and you explicitly let them know that the submission form is a Google Doc. So they actually do the work for you. They've created their own individual Google document that you can go in and look at the editing history, that you can go back and look at, you know, if they've taken your feedback, or you can give feedback, and it happens here in this page. So when they submit, it's through that specific type. And I'll always tell them, here's how I'd like you to submit, what format I'd like you to submit to the assignments page. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So you're providing, or as a teacher, you're providing a template that they're copying and pasting into their own Google Doc. That Google Doc that they create is what they submit. Is that what you mean?
Correct.
Okay.
And then you have all the functionality that you would have in Google Docs and whatnot from there. Absolutely.
So I had a question. When I had a lot of images I couldn't open up, sometimes kids said, well, we put it in there in Google Classroom assignment, and I would go to the assignment, click on the image, and sometimes it wouldn't open up, or it was missing, and they said, well, why put it in there? So do you have any kind of like flaws like that, since it's a Google Doc, when they download it into this format here, like it's there, right? It just shows up, or is it something you have to click on because it's like a little, you know, little red square with a mountain in the background or something?
Right. I see what you mean. And no, it is a, I'm sorry, let me get back to that assignments page. So it is something that you actually click on, depending on the format. The great thing is, if it's a PDF, that they've submitted, so for instance, here's an example of a Google Doc. I do have to click on it with the drive icon here. And they've done that, and then it'll take me to that document, and whether I still have permission for this or not. So here it is, it's just there. And I can make comments, I can go in, I can review it, whatever I need to. So there is that extra little step, but it really doesn't affect the efficiency of it, if you will. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I was taking notes and I missed it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So for instance, if you had that Google Doc format, like you were asking, Chippy, it would look like this. And so here it is, it's just a drive icon. So I know that's where they submitted it. If I click on it, it just takes me there. And if they've already used your preset template, that it'll look like that, and you'll be able to edit and all the functionality. So it's just a little extra step, clicking on a button to get there. If it's a PDF that they've submitted, I'm trying to find one here. Most of them just put it in the, because this is the beauty too of the assignments. If you just want them to write something up, they can just write it in the box here. Some people actually do it on a separate document. My apologies, I should have had one queued up. It looks like everyone just typed in the box, which is fine here.
Would you recommend that they, as a teacher, to all the students, that the format always be in Google Docs, just to avoid, you know, maybe because of the access and they're familiar with it, we're becoming familiar with it, just to do everything in Google Docs, drop an image in there, write the text, and then do it via that process, just to, you know, for familiarity?
Vernon, what I would say is as the year went on, I didn't do it initially, but as the year went on, I started to think about what I wanted that assignment to be, and I would give just a single format style. So it doesn't always have to be the same, but just to have the consistency of this particular assignment needs to be turned in this way. So for instance, some of them, I just wanted to look at the quick response. So I would ask them just to type in the text box. So it was there. Others, I wanted to give feedback and edit. So I would say, I need to see a Google Doc. So it's not so much that it should be this way all the time, just that for each individual assignment, there's some kind of guidance given where let's all be on the same page here. Does that make sense? At least
Yeah,
that's what I thought of it.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions about what we're seeing here so far? I want to get into some of the specifics of the topics page and how we would do that.
Yeah, Daniel, I have
Sure.
a question. I've never done this online submission, so I'm just curious, is there, like when you offer that as an option, and let's say your download, is there something that said, where do you say, I want this as a Google Doc? Do you say that in your description, or is it?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can do it. If you notice here I've just given guiding questions. Let me actually get into the editing function of this so you can take a look at it. So when you create the assignment, it actually gives you the title box as well as description. If you want to type that up, that's great. If you don't and you have something already preset so you don't have to redo the work, right here in attachments, you can download a document that is the articulated instructions that you've put out already. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, which is nice. And it's all there for you in whatever way you want. And again, even if it's a resource they need to get the assignment done, it's a link to a video or an audio file, or it's a picture you have. You could put all of that here already. And so when they submit, they already have all of that information, even if it's a rubric. So you're just looking at their raw product. And if I go back into that, the beauty of it is too, with this assignments, is that again, the integration of student information system and learning management system, I grade and give feedback here. So I comment, I give the grade, I put whatever designation, if it's late, whatever. And then once I save and close, my grade book is updated. So I'm not doing redundant work.
And then, I'm sorry, one more little quick question.
Of course.
When you uploaded, the images to a Google Doc, and then that's what you took and put on your topics page in terms of the student work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Actually, I didn't do anything. I had them submit to this page online, and pretty much everyone just submitted the raw JPEG or the PNG file. So for me, it was just a matter of downloading that real quick and then clicking and dragging those into the photo gallery space.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, of course. All right. So I want to show everyone before we get any further into this idea. I want to talk about the options you have. When you get into the editing function of a topics page under the layout section, you have these very general things like the cover image, cover title. I use those just to set up the topic. So this is just a cover title, and it'll automatically drag in whatever you defaulted the title to be when you created the topics page. Cover brief is just that initial explanation of the unit, if you wanted to do that. But what you're really going to focus on here are the materials. This is, and when we think about the functionality between Google Classroom and the topics page, these are all of your options that you easily just click and drag over into your topics page. So you can put an audio file, download anything from an image to a document, put a link to a YouTube video. If you don't want a link, you can embed it with the embed code. So it actually shows up like it does here. Actually, this is an embed. So when I look at it real time, it's the actual video. You can additionally put in that photo gallery, one photo or many photos. I use the text feature for my day-to-day operation. My day-to-day operation here, where I put all my objective rationale do now, comes in the way of a text box, and I just type into it. And really, that's it. Everything you could feasibly think about doing within a topics page fits here. So if I had a short poem, I would just type it in the text box. If there was a larger short story, actually this one I took a picture. I think I screenshotted it from online and just put it in as a photo. I gave them a download so that they could download this interview with a particular author from an essay. And in real time, what that ends up looking like is this kind of robust, repository of all your work. Here's the video, here's the photo, here's the download of the interview. And there's a couple of ways to think about this. As someone who has sub-duty, the idea of being able to look at where a teacher has been is almost, if not more valuable than knowing where they're going. And this allows us to do that. Like I could easily look in the topics bank and find that person's page and take a look at where they're at. Additionally, again, think about all those students who maybe they're studying for a test. Maybe they have a big assignment coming up and they need to synthesize a bunch of ideas. They now have that comfort and knowledge to know that they can go back into this page and recover all the information that might have slipped through their fingers. And they're not coming to you saying, can you please explain class from 2 weeks ago again to me? Because I think I might have forgotten that. In this page, when we went to the online space as well, let me go to one of our recent, I would put the Zoom links and they knew to check in on Zoom. I threw a bunch of essays on and I said, pick one and read it and respond to the assignment that's on the assignments page. I would give them notes that they needed for the entire unit, static, so they can go back and look. I would record the Zoom lectures because I thought they were important discussions, and I would put the video there so they could watch it again if they wanted to. These are all options for us. Additionally, later on, if I wanted to go asynchronous, I would actually just record myself on YouTube for the video lecture that day. So they just watch it, and once they watched it, they can do step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. And that's that. And it's there. So that's how I was using it. That's how I would share information with my students. And again, it doesn't just have to be in an online space. Even when we come back, whenever that is, into the real-time space, think about the equity of just having all of your teaching in one space for all those students who, don't have it that day or need to go over it again. And it really makes your job easier because it's all there, it's chronicled, it's proof, as well as it's there for the students. So they don't need you to regurgitate to the degree maybe that you normally would. So let's have some thoughts on this. How do you envision yourself engaging with the topics pages moving forward? What do you see the opportunities being here, or the challenges? Who'd like to jump in?
Can I share a tiny little tip I learned?
Sure.
Or that I'm going to implement? First of all, I moved to topics pages. Daniel helped me and Abby helped me before the break, and it was phenomenal on my Zoom. Because the Zoom links were on the topics page, they knew that they checked in there first, and that got us all on the same page, and it was really helpful. One silly thing I'm going to do is invert the way I do my text boxes so that the most recent lessons on top, because by the end, I didn't know we were going to have 17 lessons, so by the end, it was quite a lot of scrolling to get to the most recent lesson. So I'm going to invert it so that the most recent lesson's on top and you scroll down to go to lesson 1. But wait, I had a question. Oh, and then the one thing I hadn't done is integrate the grading function, because I didn't realize we had that possibility. I was using Google Classroom. So I may have follow-up questions, Daniel.
Yeah, of course. And I will say, I'm going to steal that, Virginia. That's really smart, because my kids have to scroll quite a bit to get to the most recent. For me, it's always just, hey, when you can't scroll anymore, you're at the right space. So, but I like your way better. Other thoughts? Opportunities, what do you see here? What works, what doesn't work? Questions?
By the time you come to class number 17, there's a whole lot of stuff there. At least my page looked awfully crowded. And like Virginia, I'm gonna also figure out how to invert it.
I will also say hi, just to jump in. The way I structured this on the setup is, if you look at my layout here, I have this whole column here,
right,
that I didn't use. But I was actually thinking about, well, why can't I use that if there's resources that I know they're going to need all year? Instead of muddling up the feed, maybe I just drop it over here, and that just stays there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you and I are going to have a private session on how to drag and drop. My dragging and dropping ain't dropping, okay? But
yeah, yes, ma'am. You have it. Whatever you need.
You can also in that column that you were talking about, the left-hand side narrow column, you can create like video folders. So you can say like, this is my instructional pre-recorded Zoom folder, so they can go in there. And it can also be part of your meeting notes, I suppose, but like, you know, just so they're all truncated together.
Yeah, and I actually used some of that, not here, but in the, in the actual, excuse me, let me get there, the bulletin board space. So I set up my bulletin board space as a place where you would understand the type of feedback I give, and you can find the course syllabi for the various courses. I even put together a video. These are all of my former students from my old school from over the years who gave advice to Crossroads kids about how to survive my class. So you can even make it fun, you know, it's just a little something just to kind of spice up the online experience, if you will. Other thoughts?
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So you were adding the meeting 1, meeting 2, meeting 3 as you went along, or you design everything at once? And you know what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah, so I would say just in general. So what I would do is I had a separate, just like Word document in which I would type up my day-to-day lessons, because the minute you put it on the topics page, it's there. There's no adaptive release function where, like in Google Classroom, where you could say, oh, I'm going to put it there, but I don't want it to be seen for a week. That doesn't happen in these topics pages. So my suggestion is just have it as a place where you can cut and paste the text into the box. So I would actually put it class by class. If anything, maybe I would put a week at a time. And let's be real, we don't know what we're going to teach until we see how our students get it from one day to the next. I might have to reteach. So I know there's a lot of talk, and I don't mean to buck the system or whatnot, but I know there's a lot of talk about having resources for 2-3 weeks on a page. Practically, that just doesn't work as an educator. So again, I think it's more important to know where you've been than to know where you're going from a pacing standpoint and whatnot. So I personally would just go class by class. I have it for myself on my desktop, but let me cut and paste it now into the space, put it there, and now it's real-time live. Yeah, it's a good question.
Can we import like units from somebody else's topics bank? Like
Yeah,
if I
so let me
wanted
show
your
you.
finding the narrative structure, I could just put it in there.
Yeah, let me show you how to get there. This is kind of one of those things. Thanks, Alan, for being here. Appreciate it. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to move a couple things around so I can see it. So we can all see here, I'm still on this topics page. Sorry, I'm getting some more chat here. Okay. Right here where it says import.
Yeah.
If you click on that, the first thing that pops up is your stuff. If you scroll down a little, you get the topics bank, and you can go by year and by teacher. So if I went to down teacher, if I went to myself, you would see all of my topics are in there, and you would just click the box and save, and they would show up on your topics page. So I encourage all of us to go in there. I know just from looking at this list of teachers here, you know, Abby actively uses this. I know Mark, just from my department, gets in on that. But you can go in and see what people are doing and save those. Additionally, I want to point out, and this is, I encourage everyone, when you're setting up your topics page, and I'm going to go back to that original look when we're editing this. So this is what pops up when we're setting up our topics page in the first place. I want to encourage everyone right here, allow others to import copies. You have to, this is by default not checked off, but you want to check that off so that we have access to the great work that you're doing, and we can take a look at that. And especially when we think about subbing in the digital space, wouldn't it be awesome if we all had everyone's running list of what they're doing and maybe even their plan just by downloading their topics page, and I have a really good sense of the depth and breadth in which you're going to from day to day to day. So, and this became really handy for me even when we were in person and I needed a sub, I would just go into my topics page, copy what I had on my text box, and email it to the teacher who was subbing. Done. And the teacher really loved it because they got to go into my classroom and say, Daniel told me you guys know what to do. And everyone was like, I know exactly where to go. I know exactly what to look for. I know the order in which I need to do it. I'm good. And that's ideally what we want, not just for ourselves as teachers, but for each other as colleagues. So I really want to encourage everyone to kind of get on board with this. So yeah, we're at 12. I know time flies. Listen, I want to say this. I am available at any time for one-on-one sessions. I would love to sit down, Zoom, spend some time going over, even let's build it together. I'm all for this. I just kind of geek out at this stuff. So I want to encourage everyone to feel free to reach out to me through email, whether it's, I know we're all fatigued from this year. If it's at the beginning of next year, let's do it. I'd love this to become a wide practice, not just for us, but for our students. I think they would really benefit from this type of access. So I really want you to seek out each other, to seek myself out, and we'll get this done together. This will be available to watch again on the Google site. I appreciate all of your time and energy and effort. And if you want to stick around once we're done here, feel free to do so and ask some specific or pointed questions. But with that, I don't want to take up any of your lunchtime. I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great summer, everybody. I'm sure I'll see you around. All right.
Daniel, can I ask you a quick question?
No.